Hi, I'm Peggy Carruthers, Vice President of the Content Studio at QSR Magazine and WTWH Media, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Traditional Store Audits Are Outdated, a New Approach to Protecting Your Brand and Boosting Franchisee Success. Today we'll talk about how new technology is letting leading quick service operators visit their stores as often as they need to ensure ideal brand experiences, operational excellence, and product quality wherever customers go. A few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. First, a recording of this session will be linked at qsrmagazine.com, and you can also use today's login link for on-demand viewing. Second, slides for today's program are also available for download using the resources widget in the webinar console. And finally, we will be answering audience questions at the end of the program, but please feel free to submit a question at any time. And now to begin, our featured speakers today are Beto Guajardo, CEO at Blaze Pizza, Keith Sayowitz, Restaurant Vertical Leader at Oxus, Julie Smith, Senior Principal and Customer and Retail at Point B. I'll turn it over to Keith to get started.
Thank you so much, Peggy. So thank you all for joining us. I think we're going to have a very good conversation today. As Peggy mentioned, we're going to be talking about the traditional store audit, what we think are the kind of issues in that world today, and what maybe some new techniques and approaches can be in order to really drive restaurant success, franchisee success. So real quickly, I'll just do a quick introduction. As I said, my name is Keith Sayowitz. I lead the restaurant practice for Oxus. By way of background, I have about 30 years of business process transformation experience across many, many industries, including the restaurant and QSR space. With that, I'll let Beto do a quick intro and Julie, and then we can jump into our agenda.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Beto Guajardo. I'm the president and CEO of Blaze Pizza. Just a little bit of background about myself. Before coming to Blaze, I was the president of Focus Brands International, overseeing 8 brands under their operations. Before that, I was the president of Schlotzsky's. Before that, I held global strategy roles for a variety of brands, including Starbucks, Levi Strauss, and Avon Cosmetics. And before that, I started my career in consulting with Deloitte & Touche and McKinsey.
Thanks, Beto. Julie?
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Julie, I am the Senior Principal of Consumer and Retail on our leadership team at Point B. And I work with companies all across the country and the globe to deal with some of these challenges, retail, restaurants, hospitality, and the like. I really focus on how the world is changing. Consumer behaviors and needs are shifting, and what companies need to do to meet them where they're going. And that can be from a digital perspective and tools and technology, or that can be from the physical environment and what stores need to really engage those consumers, and how companies bring that to life through the way that they manage those associates and engage to be excellent. Excited to be here with you all today.
Excellent. Thank you, Julie. So real quickly, our agenda for today. So we're going to cover a few different topics, and I think we have a very good conversation. So at the top of the list, we're going to talk about what we mean by brand consistency and why does that matter, and how does that correlate to the restaurant review and audit process in today's world. What's working and why, and what the limitations of the current model in this space is. We're going to do a quick conversation about what is a better model than the way that we've done it today, how technology maybe can enable us in the future. I think that's prevalent on everyone's mind in the QSR and restaurant spaces. How can we start to leverage technology in order to advance the review and quality and compliance process inside our restaurants? And how do we merge that technology with the people that are executing that today, and how do we do it at a scalable cost? So starting off, what we'd like to do is do a quick couple of poll questions just to get a gauge for where everyone's thoughts are on some of these topics. We'll talk about the responses to these and then incorporate that into our discussion. So to start off with, do you know what excellence looks like for your brand? Yes, I know when I see it, or no, I do not. So please go ahead and submit your responses. We'll give everyone a couple of minutes to submit their responses, or a couple of seconds maybe. We get about 20% or so in here, 22%, there we go. All right, excellent. So do you know what REST looks for your brand? So about 66% of us said yes, 22% I know when I see it, and another 11% said they do not. So let's go to one more. Would your frontline associates and store managers define excellence the same way that you're defining excellence? Which is a very interesting question. As restaurant leaders, do we feel like our associates and managers in the store understand restaurant excellence or what we're trying to accomplish the same way that you do as operators? So let's go ahead and submit our responses. Another couple seconds, and we'll jump in. Okay, so I think this is probably the most interesting possible response we could have gotten back. So 90% of you approximately have said no. So clearly this is a really important topic for us all to spend some time delving into today. Okay, so with that, what I'm going to do is turn it over to Julie, and we're going to speak a couple minutes about what do we even mean by brand consistency and why does it matter, and how does that shape, how does that tie into the couple questions we just talked about in your responses? I turn it over to you, Julie.
Great. Everybody, thank you. And let me know if I'm breaking up. I think my bandwidth might not be exactly where we want it to be. So, that's really interesting to see the response to that poll. And it's not uncommon. We work with a number of different restaurants and retailers, and we see that a lot. People think that they understand what excellence looks like. And then when they get out to their stores, or even just conversations with their broader executive team or operations team, they realize that everyone has maybe a different definition of what that looks like. And it's important to have that consistency, to create that common shared definition and taxonomy, because we can't achieve something we don't agree on, right? And so when we look at the way that consumers engage with restaurants and retailers, we see that predictability, that consistency across stores is so incredibly important. That if you have a store or restaurant that is not performing well, and there are reviews online about that's the front door for many people, and that taints the whole system. People see that and think, well, that place isn't clean, or the service there isn't very good, or that wasn't very welcoming environment, or inclusive. And so, maybe that's just not the brand for me. We expect things to be the same. Where we see companies that have that consistency, we see that consumers keep coming back, that employees know how to do their job well. We also see that, one of the things that employees really crave is that definition. What we did a study last year, and one of those surprising, not surprising results was that employees in frontline roles really want to be good at their jobs. They don't just want to come in and do what's necessary to get paid and then get back to the other parts of their life. They want to be successful. And being able to know what the rules of engagement are, what makes for success, how they know if they're being successful is really important. So that consistency and that predictability, it serves your customer well, and it serves your employee well too. And fundamentally, what we see is this ends up increasing people's desire to walk through the door. When they know that they're going to be greeted by somebody that is excited to be there, when they know that they're going to be in a space that they recognize, we see conversion rate go up, 10 to 20%. So it's an important thing to think about, and it's a thing to define up front so that you know what you're shooting for.
I think this is super interesting. I'd love to get Beto's thoughts here, because one of the things that strikes me about this topic is that if the local staff doesn't have the same impression of what consistency looks like and what excellence looks like, in many, many brands, the way that we're kind of executing this process is by having regional staff, district managers visiting these locations. And one of the things I hear over and over again is that the perception of one district manager, maybe on the West Coast, is completely different how he looks at the store versus a district manager in another region. So even when we have a compliance program, or even when we're looking to see how the restaurant performs, even the people that are evaluating it don't look at it the same way. And we have inconsistency there, as well as with what the frontline staff are looking at. I'd love to get your thoughts here, Beto.
Yeah, so Keith, great point. And let me just share an antidote. So many of the folks who are probably listening in on this webinar, they probably have area managers or franchise business consultants who are out there visiting the stores. I'm sure most of you have done the cost benefit analysis of how much does it cost to actually physically get a person to go from one store to the next store and to the next store. And by the way, the problem domestic is overshadowed by what we're dealing with in the complexity of international. And if you don't have that leader going in to coach the store manager, then that inconsistency is going to show up again and again and again, and it's going to slow your growth prospects down. Many of you probably do stair tech audits. You're taking a look at quality control within the store, making sure that no one's getting poisoned. But that's blocking and tackling. That's not going to be what grows sales. It's really about how the experience is showing up for the consumer. And the way you manage that is to have more eyes in all of your stores more often, coaching those store managers so that they can transcend it down to their employees. A customer will never have a better experience than the experience that the employees are having in the store when they visit.
That's great.
Yeah, I'd love to add one thing there.
Yeah,
one of the things
Julie.
that we've seen over the last years, especially in COVID, was that people were trying to solve some of this problem by just creating more tools and more paperwork to describe what should be happening in the stores. And what we've seen from a lot of our clients is that it's pushing it to the store to make the decision, well, which checklist do I look at, or which make card should I be considering, or how do I make this really be the right thing when there's like 10,000 different ways that I could do this, or there's 10 different documents that I could be looking at every day. And so I love what you said, Beto, about having that two-way conversation and having that on-the-ground coaching can really help cut through some of that noise to help people really understand what's most important.
Absolutely.
That's great. So I think we have strong alignment that what's important is we need to get to a place where there is consistency of execution, and that both the brand leadership and the folks on the ground executing need to be on the same page there. So the question is, how do we get there, and what are we doing today in order to get there? So, so let's real quickly, before we jump into that, I forgot we had a poll question next. Let's quickly do this poll question, which is, if it is so important, how often are you visiting your stores? So whether that be a third-party auditor, or you have a regional manager or a district manager that's visiting, the question is, how often are you getting to your stores? So let's quickly put in our responses there, and then we can talk about this topic. seconds. All right, excellent. So thankfully, there's nobody that's not visiting at all. We've got 20% or 21% visiting 1 to 2 times per year, 31% visiting 3 to 4 times per year, and 47% visiting 5 or more times a year, which is amazing to hear, since that's definitely not something that we generally see in the industry, that there's folks that are actively in a location that many times, validating what's working and what's not, and how a store is executing from an operations and safety perspective. So let's talk about what we do see today, and maybe what another approach to this may be. So from what is today's model? So today's model, as we know, are based on in-person visits. It's done either with a third party or with some type of leadership and from a district perspective. The industry in general is 1 to 2 times per year. And the model is oftentimes, especially with third parties, more about it's a surprise visit. You don't know that I'm coming, and I want to make sure that I understand, I can see what's happening in the location, and you didn't have a chance. I'm really trying to make sure that I see what the reality is, not what's happening because I'm going to show up tomorrow. And then oftentimes we'll see that there's a merger of a food safety component and more of an operational review component. Brands are doing is they're making sure that that visit not just is about food safety, but about operational excellence, operational execution. The benefits there we see are that oftentimes the folks in the restaurant can build a rapport with the folks at the local level. Sure that if they don't know how to do something properly, they're asking the right questions, and maybe I'm not doing that right, but can you show me the right way to do it? And that's a discipline that we really look to see occur. They get to see it live of what's happening, and we have human-to-human interaction. And then the other benefit there is that it's hard to hide issues because someone's in the store and they're seeing things. But I think most people would acknowledge that there's some limitations to the model that exists today. It's very difficult to scale. It's costly from a geographic and travel complexity perspective. And then as you add more stores, you have to add more structure and cost, which is very difficult, especially in a franchise model, and even more difficult in an international franchise model. The cost is high. In general, it's going to cost you several $100s an audit or more, or review or visit. And international standpoint, much more than that. There's not really a lot of technology involved in today's world. It's really just a report that comes back. We're not really driving or using data to make big picture decisions. That's something that we really see as a significant limitation in today's model, is that because we don't look at it consistently, because we don't capture the data well, it's very difficult for us to draw correlations that say, I see that this region is doing these things well, and as a result of that, I see a lift from a revenue perspective. Or I see a correlation for maybe our restaurants that aren't as clean or aren't following marketing programs as well, and what that impact is doing. So since we don't have access to the data, we can't use that data to drive to a better perspective from a revenue perspective. And then it's very difficult to execute other types of visits. Something that we've seen that is kind of a gap is that as brands will roll out LTOs or we're opening new stores, and because we don't have enough headcount to really make these visits, even from an operational execution perspective, we really don't have the bandwidth to do it from other significant or important areas. Anything you'd like to add to this, Beto? I know that you have a lot of firsthand experience executing in this role.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Keith. One of the things that I experienced both at my time at Starbucks, in the retail world with Levi's and Focus Brand here at Blaze Pizza, was those area managers oftentimes would find themselves doing quality control audits, measuring the temperature of the refrigerator, or looking underneath the counters for mold, or doing those types of things. I mean, that's an expensive visit to have someone taking the temperature inside your refrigerator, right? As opposed to an elevated role for that area manager, where they're talking about business strategy and talking about how to drive demand into the store, and providing world-class hospitality coaching, right? As opposed to those technical measurements. The whole idea of more eyes in the store more often frees up the area manager's opportunity to really become more of a coach to the store manager. A coach to the coach is what I like to call it.
So let's talk about another way. So just real quick, let's do another poll question. Do you believe your compliance program is driving operational excellence? So the visits that you're conducting, which we saw for the most part, the folks that have responded to the poll are actually visiting their stores. Do you believe that that compliance program you're executing is driving operational excellence? So no, yes, I don't know, I can't measure it, or partially, but it can be significantly improved. Let's go ahead and submit our responses. And then we're going to spend a couple minutes talking about another way to maybe realize the same benefits or greater benefits. Give it a couple more seconds, get over 30% here. All right, excellent. So 17% no, 17% yes, super interesting. I don't know, I can't measure it. Partially, but it can be significantly improved. So we're at 40% or so that either don't know or think the answer is no, but can't measure it. So very interesting. So what do you see as the main challenges of your current compliance program? It's too costly to achieve the desired benefits. It is too focused on food safety and not operational excellence. It is not data and technology enabled. We are not doing enough with the results. So you're executing the program, you have results, but you're not taking the time to execute them. So let's quickly go through our responses on this one.
I always have to wonder if it's going to be all of the above for some folks too, It could be a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I would guess that in many cases, it's a merger of multiple of these responses. Very interesting to hear across different brands their feedback though. Okay, so it is too costly to achieve desired benefits, almost 20%. We're too focused on food safety and not operational excellence, 25%, which I think is a very common situation, is that food safety is what most folks and brands view as the bare minimum. They have to do it. And then you just don't end up doing the rest. It's not data and technology enabled, 31%. We're not doing enough with the results, 25%. Very interesting. Okay, so a better model than the surprise visit is the frequent visit. So this is something that we've spent a lot of time thinking about, and we've worked with Beto on a program previously that really attempts to address a lot of the things that we've kind of indicated here. And that the value is, I think a lot of brands have always looked at it and said, because I have cost limitations in how often I can visit my store, whether that's with a third party or with an internal staff, that the best way to make sure that I know what's really happening is that I have an unannounced visit. And because I have an unannounced visit, I'm seeing the reality of the situation. But to Beto's point earlier, the best possible scenario is that I don't have a budget problem and I can be in my stores as often as possible. And what happens by that, by having a continual occurrence, a continual visit in the restaurant, is that you're keeping standards up consistently because the visit is always coming. There's always people that are going to be in your restaurant. They're always going to be there on a regular cadence. And the question is, that makes sure that everyone's kind of always on their game. I don't know how we just changed slides. Anything that you'd want to add to this, Julie or Beto?
Yeah, real quick, Keith. Imagine, you're a store manager And every time someone comes into your store from corporate or from field operations, you feel like it's that gotcha moment, right? Like, oh, and you know, when you arrive, is there genuine compassion and care, or is it punishment? And when you do it more frequently, you can build a relationship, and that expectation of, you're here to help me be better, you're not here to catch me doing something wrong. To your point, Keith, over and over and over again, what if you can get into your store once a month, twice a month? Like, what happens to the relationship between that, what I call coach, and the store manager? It changes the game.
Thank you. Any thoughts? Anything you want to add here,
Yeah,
Julie?
I love that. I love the idea of building that relationship. Oh yeah, sorry. I love the idea of building that relationship. And I also think you're able then to get better longitudinal data to understand what are really the root causes, what are the challenges. Is this a one-hit wonder that there's a problem on this one day because, you know, someone, some unfortunate thing happened in the store, a pipe burst and so there's water places or some things like that? Or is this a trend of what you're seeing in this environment? And how can you best coach to make sure that you're addressing the real problem versus just what's right in front of you? The more touches that you have, the more chance you get to understand, why does the problem exist? And is it a training issue? Is it a tool issue? Is it a systemic issue? What are the real problems to solve?
Yeah. So, which really brings us to how, right? So how do we go from a place where we don't have the means, it's too expensive. We know that we want to be in the restaurants on a regular basis. We know that we need consistency. We know that we need the right data coming out of that. So how do we make that happen on a continuous basis? And what we're going to do is talk through a use case of what we've done in the past in this space, which I think really is a bit of a real shift in the way things are looked like. And it's really about leveraging what's available to us in the market today that really wasn't available in the market 4, 5, 10 years ago. And that's the merging together of technology to enable this space, along with building a team or a center of excellence which can execute these types of necessary reviews, visits into the stores, but in a virtual manner. So maybe, Beto, if you want to talk for a couple of minutes about what you built in the past and what came out of that, and then we can kind of delve into some details there.
Absolutely. So when I first took over the international business at Focus Brands, I asked my field operations team, how often were we getting into stores? How many stores did we go see before COVID hit? And it turned out the number was like 150. So my entire field operations team around the globe, 52 countries, 1,600 stores, we got to visit 150 stores out of the 1,600 that we actually had in the system. So at that rate, I would have answered your question, we're not visiting our stores, right? I get into my stores once every 12 years, essentially, if you do the math. And so what we were looking for was to get more hands and more eyes into the stores more often. And that's when we partnered with Oxys to build what we were calling the Customer Experience Center of Excellence, because we really wanted to focus these virtual visits on the ability to truly be partners and coaches to these store managers. And we started off basically going in and documenting what are our brand standards across every touch point you can imagine in the store, not just how you prepare the food, how you clean your kitchen, the temperature on your refrigerator, but we also did promotions, and we did observations of great customer interaction. Excuse me. And we captured all that, and we were able to, with Oxys's help, build the capability, identify individuals who became our virtual coaches, train them consistently on our brand standards. They were all together in the Oxys office, so they actually got to work off of one another, and they truly became brand excellence ambassadors. And then we started those store visits. At first, you can imagine, take about an hour, 75 minutes, and they would go through about 110 different check items, but it includes everything, right? And at first, there was a lot of defensive on it, like, oh, this is, what are you trying to do to me? But then they get the report back, and then there was a follow-up of what was fixed, what was corrected, what was improved, and then the frequency of yet another visit, and then yet another visit. And what we found when we built the analytics to actually track what was being observed in the store, what was being improved in the store, and how did that correlate to improve sales. And what we found, and Keith helped me with this, we actually split Thailand in half. And we did half of Thailand getting the visits and half not getting the visits. And these numbers are going to sound exceptional to y'all. But we had enough stores that this was statistically relevant. The stores, once they had received their third visit versus the stores that had received none, actually began to grow their comp sales by more than 10% versus the stores that didn't get it. And the interesting thing is, by the time you got to the third visit, store managers were saying, can you come back next month? Like, we don't want to wait a full quarter. Like, we'd like to have you more often. And the pride that became, within this operations was incredible. And at the end of the day, and for all of you in the franchise business, you know that growing comp sales is the absolute best mechanism for growing more units, right? Growing comp sales helps you grow more units. Once we started growing those comp sales, the way we did, we actually went from 1,600 units internationally to 2,000 internationally in just over 2 years.
Yeah, the cadence power is incredibly, it's really just incredibly powerful, is that by continually visiting over and over again, reinforcing and discussing, by leveraging what we're seeing and learning across people's peers and their stores and what's working and what's not, really kind of amplifies the results. And what makes it possible is by having a team of folks, which we did in Latin America, where a single coach or reviewer is literally visiting multiple stores in a single day. It just makes it able to accomplish something that we just can't accomplish physically, right? Is the ideal scenario that we could have an unlimited number of staff that's in the locations every single day? Yes, that's the ideal scenario. But
yeah, we were visiting, 6 to 8 stores a day per coach. And so the level of consistency and the quality of those coaching moments just continued to escalate as the program went on.
Yeah. And then the other piece of it, and I'm sure Julie want to weigh in here as well, is the other piece that's so powerful is the data itself. Because the review itself is based on a consistent SOP, a consistent operational standard, a consistent definition of excellence, is that when the data comes in for every review, it's always the same. It's the same view of how something is being executed. And then that data, the power of the data, enables regional leadership to really make decisions. This is working in this area, and as a result of that, let's double down. And the information now for an MUO in some region isn't anecdotal, it's factual based. These stores are doing this, and as a result of that, this is their comp. And that piece of being able to have data that really drives decisions, and it's not debatable one way or the other, drives a lot of power.
Yeah,
Well said.
I love that. I think it also allows you to see where there are real trends across your stores, right? So you may find that if you have a distributed group going out and doing audits or checks or coaching, that you're seeing some problems that are different places. But when you're doing it in a consistent way, you can really see the patterns emerge across to say, oh, actually, this is a systemic problem that we could solve from a corporate perspective by changing the way we're training, or by providing a different type of raw material or product that is shelf stable, or whatever the issue is, that allows you to then solve the problem in a more creative way than just thinking about the store level solutions. So I think it gives you that insight, which I think is really important as well.
So obviously, to accomplish something like this, there's a tech component to it. And I'm sure many of you started to think about what is the technology that you're going to start to bring to bear in this space. So let's talk about that for a minute. So are you planning to implement technology such as IoT or Internet of Things devices into your compliance program. So as an example, an IoT device in this space may be remote temperature monitoring, as an example. Clearly, in order for us to execute a program like this, we're using video conference software, we're using audit software to record results. At scale, we obviously have to have the ability to schedule a mass number of these. So there's a lot of technology in play here. But let's kind of take a look at what have all of you been thinking about from a technology perspective. So yes, we have a plan. Yes, but we have no plan. No, or don't know, but we see value in it. Give a couple seconds for a few more responses. And what about 30%? Okay, so 37%, yes, we have a plan. That's amazing. Yes, but we have no plan, another 18 or 19%. Super interesting. No one is not planning on leveraging technology, which I think probably everyone's CEO and CIO would be happy to hear. And don't know, but we see value in it, almost 44%, which is obviously super significant. Okay, so technology and the future of compliance audits or operational audits. So I think everyone kind of acknowledges that technology is super important in the space and we need to move there. So the question is, what is the technology that is going to be leveraged there? So I think most people would agree that there's a future here in IoT, temperature monitoring, in-store music, in-store promotions. There's a component from operation perspective related to climate control. We've been speaking to a lot of brands that are really, this is a very important thing for them. I was actually just this last week at the National Restaurant Association conference, which probably a good bit of you maybe attended as well. Something that we see in these conferences is a huge push. There's a whole bunch of companies now that are using video software. They have video cameras in the restaurants, and they're merging that with POS data. And the combination of POS data and video, they'll say it's AI, but it's the very beginnings of AI. And that's really used to say, do we see POS transactions that have more likely to have fraud as part of them? And that's the big advent really of AI right now in the restaurant space. I spoke to every one of the vendors at the conference that were in this space, and I asked the same question of all of them, which is, are you starting to have any models that are about operations and video and AI? So where I'm detecting whether or not people are using gloves when they prepare food, or they're following the right standards. Are they executing the build properly of that item? And really nobody has anything yet built. There was one partner that we saw, and they started to have a model, which is the ability to say, is there a safety issue, a food safety issue? But when the model brought back results, what it came back with was really about cleanliness in the back office. So we're very early on in the AI space here related to this. But really, this is where it's going, right? Is that we want to be able to leverage technology, add it in here. But I think I would guess all of our panelists would agree that we're probably years away from this really technology replacing the human element here. And I don't know it's ever going to replace the human element. It's really going to be a combination of things, technology along with a human interaction.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think we see that a lot now is, how do you use technology as a way to expand that conversation or to deepen it, to allow people to do maybe some self-service? I'm going to upload an image and you tell me what's wrong with it, or you can analyze. But then when something is wrong, how do you bring in more human coaching to help solve the problem? I think there's some really interesting applications coming, but I do think it isn't to replace the human being. And I, at all levels, I think from this coaching perspective, but even what we're seeing in the in-store technology is, I'm sure many of you feel this, but most of our clients are in an experience where their staff is tight. The labor market hasn't picked up, even though there's all these conversations that it's going to. It's still hard to hire and expenses for hourly workers are getting incredibly more expensive, especially in states like California. And so the ability to do more with fewer people is so important. And so these tools, both from the analysis and the coaching and the measurement perspective, can be really helpful to do that, to enable you to unlock time for your people on the floor, or your store manager or your area managers to be able to do the things, to what Beto was saying earlier, that are really important. Like, how do you actually spend time thinking about growing the business versus using technology, versus using people to answer questions where the technology could be much more efficient and helpful. So
yeah, I'd like to build on that, and I'd like to get Beto's thoughts here. Is that something I think that's super interesting that you brought up? Is there's this use case that we see in the marketplace, which is the self-audit, where we use a little bit of tech and a store manager maybe self-assesses and then takes a picture of something and they upload a file. And this is something that we really see emerging in the marketplace. It's a little different than how we've approached it. And I think the limitation that we see in that use case is that it's very asynchronous in nature, and that there's a piece of information that gets loaded, and then in order to react on that, there has to be someone that then goes back, reviews it, has a conversation. And the model that we've talked about and done with Beto is much different than that. And it's really about being able to give feedback along with a review and coaching. So there's much more of an instantaneous and much more of a human interaction, even though it's a remote visit. I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, again, really in support of what you both said, I want to reiterate this idea that the human element in coaching a store manager to be a great hospitality deliverer and to be a great store manager to his employees, you can't get that out of a manual. You can't get that out of a placard card. You get it because the coach has a great coach. I mean, I probably sound like a stuck record here, but it's so important that we actually implement more humanity into our stores, not less.
Excellent. Okay. So what's the secret sauce? So I think this is what we've been speaking about, right? Is we know we want frequency, but frequency obviously comes with a cost component. So the solve here is something along the lines of a nearshore team, which helps us manage our costs. But we still have to be brand experts. The folks that are meeting with the stores and talking to them have to understand what they're talking about and be able to have intelligent conversations, provide good feedback, do it in a consistent manner. And that requires the technology enablement that goes along with that. And then that gets us to really what we're looking for all in the big picture, which is we want consistent consumer experiences, which we know drives customer loyalty. There's a stat that we put in a lot of our materials, and that stat is something like 73% of people have said that they will abandon a brand after just a single poor experience, which is an insane statistic. But even if that is off by plus or minus 20%, if half of your consumers are willing to walk away after a bad consumer experience, then how do we not do what we need to do in order to make sure those experiences are consistent? Okay. So just a little bit of information. I'm going to let Beto talk about this for a second, because this kind of speaks to the exact use case of the results. And what's important here is that there's a flavor here, which is not only do we see positive feedback about the process overall from those it's being executed with, but then there's a revenue correlation, which obviously, so we think about what is it that our CFOs are looking for from a new venture perspective. We know that we want cost savings, we know we want revenue increase, and we want customer satisfaction. And that really is what drives a great business case. Beto.
Keith, I'm just reading the slide and I'm thinking to myself, oh man, I missed this. This is awesome. Yeah, thanks for bringing me back. I love this. It was I'm just going to share something that may not be relevant to everyone on this call, but one of the things that we were able to do with Auxis's support was we actually got coaches that spoke 8 different foreign languages. And so suddenly we were able to give coaching to a store manager in Saudi Arabia in Arabic. We were able to do the same in Japan and Japanese, and we were able to do the same in Thailand, and in Russia. And it was, it was a game changer, first of all, to have, because store managers typically, especially international, are going to be less sophisticated and may not know English. It's not required. And so by having the right people actually deliver the coaching experience was critically important. And we spent a lot of time finding those right people, didn't we, Keith? To make sure we got the right folks to actually become those ambassadors for the brand and become those coaches that were so important. You look at these numbers here on the left side of the page. You don't have to read all the details. Big numbers mean good stuff, right? When you're trying to measure performance. But on the right-hand side, you see these quotes. And this to me is what was so important that really made it come alive. The experience with the review is perfect. The auditor is nice and gives pointers for the things that need to improve that will be helpful for the business operations as well as customer satisfaction. As a first-time handler of OERs, that's the name of the coaching session. I'm impressed how it goes. And Coach Carroll was very patient. Thank you so much, Coach. A massive thank you for all for being so kind and polite with us, Coach, and for explaining to us where we could improve in our store. These are not just quotes taken out of 1 or 2 great things that happened. This was the feedback that we were getting all over the world. I really appreciate you bringing me back to it, Keith.
Yeah, my pleasure. So one last poll question, I think this may be our last one, is do you think a technology-enabled virtual program can meet your needs? No. Yes. Yes, but I don't think this would work for my brand. Go ahead and submit our responses. Not sure if the system, there we go. And then I'll just add after this, I think we're probably going to do a couple minutes of questions. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to add them in to the system. So 23% no, 58 and 59% yes. Yes, but I don't think this would work for my brand, 17%. So just, so I don't know if Beto or Julie, if you got any closing thoughts, and then give people a chance to put in some questions, and then we can take a couple minutes if we get any questions and answer those.
Yeah, I'll go first, Julie, and then turn it over to you. Never let a good crisis pass you by. And it was actually the idea of virtual coaching was born out of crisis, coming out of COVID and not having the ability to get into the stores. And, I have been fortunate enough in my career to be around some of the best operators in the world. I mean, in the world, especially my time at Starbucks. I'm forever grateful for the experience that I had with that team. And bringing the analytics and the humanity together underneath the technology that enables this to work was a game changer for us. If you don't think it can work for your brand, that just means you have to learn more. And if you don't think it could work at all, maybe it won't. But I think there is really something to this program that isn't just going to change your company. This is something that's going to change the entire industry. I'm fully convinced of that. Final thoughts.
Julie?
Yeah. Well, I would just say, I think that there are so many opportunities to improve the way that we serve customers and the way that we show up with consistency daily. But I think we're all going to be challenged to think about how do we use technology in ways to do this more effectively and efficiently that is something we can really put our arms around and understand today. And while there are technologies that are out there that are farther afield, I think looking at how do we practically solve some of these challenges today is going to be really the most important. And I think being able to see across stores, to be able to see across your system, ownership models, geographies with consistency is just a huge unlock to help your store level performance rise and to be able to enable you to grow with confidence as you're growing new stores, to know that you are doing this in a way that doesn't replicate the challenges of the past, but enables you to build on a platform of success. So I think there's a lot of great opportunity here for people to really think differently about how they coach their stores and improve their performance across their system.
I want to add one final thought, Julie, if you don't mind. So one of the things that we ended up doing, the technology enabled us to actually drop in on any virtual audit whenever we wanted. And so we had monitors in our office, and we would take turns, you know, hey, let's go check out how an audit's going in Russia. And then we could watch it. Now that's different than just watching a still camera that's hanging in the back of the store, where you get bored after 2 minutes, right? Because of you're actually seeing the store manager interacting with the coach, walking through all of those brand elements that you've identified that you're seeking excellence out of. I know it was probably the least important thing that I did, Keith, but I love the fact that you gave me the opportunity to actually tap into those coaching virtual audits and watch them ourselves from Atlanta.
Yeah, it's very powerful also from a training perspective, right? Is it because you want to make sure that before that person starts to talk to restaurants, that you feel like they understand and are really knowledgeable enough to have an intelligent conversation with a store manager or a franchisee, and that ability to really be a part of that session is very powerful. So we did get a few questions. So one is, do you work with clients that maintain a hybrid model where you do both physical and virtual? So very interesting question. I really think the best way to think about this incarnation is that it's not a single way, right? There is a concept that says maybe in an international footprint where you don't have the ability to really have a physical presence in the region, that maybe it's much more virtual in nature. But we definitely see brands that have a robust structure domestically and really want to be able to do what Beto was referring to, which is elevate those folks into not having to be a quote unquote auditor, and they get that information fed to them, right? It enables you, I think everybody has this thought process in operations, is what is the right mix or the right ratio of a district manager to their region, and what does that mean? And by able to have this in your toolkit, it enables that district manager to maybe have a slightly bigger scale, because they don't have to be in every location in order to get that data. They can be there a little less often, and they're still getting more information than they were the other way. So I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind as we look at that, as we look at this model. And then we got a question, I think maybe is a good question for Julie, which is, how can we guarantee consistent service and quality followed by restaurants apart from team training and audits? How can we assure excellence all the time?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. You know, we've worked with some really large restaurant brands on this challenge. And part of it was really that first part of like, how do you define excellence and what does it look like? And so at the very highest level, how do we have a common definition that resonates across the corporate organization, but also all the way down to the store level? How do you bring people into that conversation that are operating at the store, even just at the very definition of the tippy top, what does excellence look like? But then following it up with, okay, how do we create a taxonomy to say, these are the 5 activities that support this pillar of excellence. And these are the 6 activities that support this one, and these are the 3 activities. So these are the things that you really have to focus on. And if those things are all humming, then you know as a store manager that your store is operating with excellence. And if something is broken there, then you can dig down to say, well, what's the root cause? What's the real challenge? But having that initial definition that allows you to set up that measurement system, that allows you to know what you're looking for as you're doing these sessions and coaching is really critical. And bringing in people from across the organization, from your stores, from operations, from your marketing team who's thinking about the brand impression that you're making and how it ties to the promise that you're making to your customers is incredibly important and takes some effort and energy, but pays dividends in terms of having that customer stickiness and that conversion and that consistency across.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big picture is there's not a magic wand, right? And that the idea is that there's many steps you have to take. And one of the key steps is a constant presence in your stores that's adding value to your store managers and franchisees and restaurant operators. So with that, I think that concludes our webinar. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Hopefully everybody found this valuable, and have a good day.
Thank you all. And just a quick note from the QSR team, just so you know, you can find a recording of the program on qsrmagazine.com, or you can use today's login link to view it at any time or download the slides. If you do have any questions while you're watching on demand, you can still ask and our presenters will receive the questions. Thanks again to our viewers, to our audience for attending, and of course to Beto, Keith, and to Julie for sharing their insights, and as well to Oxus for hosting our lovely program today. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.